When social media platforms Twitter and Facebook closed down Donald Trump's accounts for inciting violence last week, the US president got backing from some pretty unexpected sources. In what may further fuel Europe's battle with big tech, the German Chancellor Angela Merkel objected to Trump's ban, insisting that lawmakers and not private tech companies should set the rules governing free speech. Our political editor Darren McCaffrey has been wading into the debate and he joins us now from Brussels. Hello there to you, Darren. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because digital regulation has been a very thorny issue for Brussels, hasn't it? So now, how does this whole banning of Donald Trump's social media accounts play into the EU's own fight when it comes to big tech?
Well, it certainly prompted a debate, I think, Isabel, given the fact that, of course, there are tens of millions of users here in Europe of Twitter and Facebook and other social media websites. And there has been an ongoing discussion for years about the power potentially that they have and the hold to a degree over European Union citizens, but also about where that line is between essentially freedom to speech and also then the ability potentially to break the law online. In the EU, or certainly many elements of the European Union, feel that that line needs to move, that these social media companies need to be regulated more, that potentially they need to be treated more like publishers than platforms. And that means curbing their power. It means regulating them, introducing laws. Now, there is obviously problems with that. How far do you go, for example? And also, who gets to decide what those laws are? Because, you know what, as uncomfortable people might be with people like Mark Zuckerberg, for example, deciding what can appear on Facebook or not, at the same time, are people comfortable with politicians potentially deciding what is allowed to be said online and what isn't?
Yeah, well, Darren, well, this kind of broaches the question which you've touched upon. Why is it, though, ultimately so difficult for the EU to make inroads when it comes to this?
Well, because it's a really difficult question to grapple with. It's one that gets to the fundamentals of what it means when it comes to freedom of speech. Of course, you know, what one person says may well infringe the freedoms of others. And that's why it's a very difficult line in many ways to kind of get right. So we've heard quite a lot of reaction today, as you say, from the German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who branded the decision by Twitter to ban Donald Trump as problematic. She went on to say that essentially freedom of speech is at a core principle and that it shouldn't be up to social media leaders and owners to decide what constitutes that. It should be up to legislators. And that view was echoed by Manfred Weber, the EPP president in the European Parliament. And also weighing into debate was Thierry Breton. He is the EU's internal commissioner now. He went as far as saying that the attacks on the Capitol building in the United States last week were the 9/11 for social media, and suggested that the European Union does need to go further when it comes to the regulation of social media companies. There are already proposals on the table by the Commission to essentially make what is illegal offline illegal online, though to a large degree those laws do already comply. Now, I had a chance to speak to Sophie Enveld. She is a MEP, and I began by asking her that question, essentially, you know, what did she think of what had happened last week? What impact that might well have on us here in Europe?
Speaking, first of all, it's not a curb on the freedom of speech because Trump has plenty of other podiums and platforms to make his voice heard. It's just that certain companies like Twitter are saying we don't necessarily want to provide him with that podium, but he's free to say whatever he likes. Although, and that's the second point, freedom of speech is one of the key elements of our democracy, but it is not absolute. There are certain things that we have banned, like incitement to hatred, incitement to violence. And I suppose, there are people saying, like what happened last week was the president actually inciting people to insurrection or a sedition, which is possibly a crime. So, I'm not in favor of removing people lightly. I also don't think it's up to companies to decide what is and what is not acceptable.
Isn't the concern, though, because you said obviously that decision about what is appropriate and what isn't, essentially ultimately what will become illegal and not legal, because that's essentially how governments and the EU has to operate, will be decided by politicians. And lots of people don't feel terribly
Yes.
comfortable with politicians getting to decide what they're allowed to say and not say. You have to
Actually,
talk to
well,
people in Hungary. People in Hungary would say they would not want Viktor Orban to decide
no, but
what they can
look,
say online and not.
it's not about politicians deciding what you can say. It's about politicians deciding what is legal, what is not legal. And on the whole, also in the European Union and in the United States, freedom of speech is pretty much secure. So that's not the worry. But I do think
So
this
why do
whole
they,
situation.
So then
No, but
do
listen,
they
no, but hang on.
more
There's
regulation?
certain things which are illegal offline. They should be illegal online. I think that should be the principle. We're not going to criminalize things online which are legal offline. That should be the principle.
I saw you got involved in a debate though with one politician online about his support for Donald Trump.
Yes. Well, no, this is about the Prime Minister of Slovenia, the country that will be taking the EU presidency 6 months from now. And he already back in November, he congratulated Donald Trump on his triumph, his victory. As far as I know, he has not congratulated President Biden yet. Of course, I mean, he's entitled to his views. He doesn't have to be a fan of Biden, but as a prime minister of a country, it would be polite and customary to do that. But it also struck me that he is retweeting quite intensively a lot of tweets which are echoing, what President Trump is saying, throwing in doubt the results of the American elections, talking about conspiracies. And I found that rather striking, given that most other government leaders in Europe have actually taken their distance very firmly from Trump and from what happened last week.
And that was our political editor, Darren.